Welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. So, after Joe Rogan's interview with Dr. Robert Malone broke the internet, reaching over 50 million people, it seems the whole world is talking about mass formation psychosis. But according to the mainstream media and fact checkers, it doesn't exist. But if that's the case, why are they absolutely scrambling to discredit it? Why is Google changing search results in real time to bury it, to memory hole it? Is there a much deeper, darker secret they're trying to hide? A secret that could expose the inner workings of their mass manipulation of our society? Well, we're going to find out on today's show. But before we get started, a few messages for you. First off, a few folks over the time of doing Man in America have asked me if I had any recommendations for where to buy gold. Now, I used to actually be in the precious metals and jewelry industry and knew quite a bit about buying gold, investing in gold, but I didn't have anybody I could recommend because I hadn't vetted anybody. So I spent some time researching and settled on working with Noble Gold. I called them as if I was a person looking to buy gold, asked them how they price things, because I know what overpriced gold looks like, and I know what fair priced gold looks like. And I can tell you, if you're getting cheaply priced gold, it's probably not real gold. Gold's a commodity. You can't get super bargains on it. What's most important is that you find someone that you can trust. So I thoroughly vetted them. And if you want to buy some gold just to set aside or take advantage of some loopholes in how you can move your IRA into gold, right? If you're with Vanguard IRA, for instance, well, Vanguard just so happens to be one of the big financial institutions that owns a lot of the companies that are out to get us these days. So if you want to move your money out of that system, whether it's through an IRA transfer or direct purchase, I do recommend Noble Gold. If you have any questions about this as an independent person, you can email me, email gold@maninamerica.com, and I will personally respond to you with my thoughts on gold because I've got a lot. I personally, most of my investments are gold. I don't have that many, but I don't have any money in the stock market. That's what I believe in. So you can email me, or if you want to download a free guide about it, go to goldwithseth.com, and the links are in the description below. Also, if you want to follow me online, I highly recommend heading over to Telegram, finding me at Man in America. I've also got my podcast up. So in the description to the video, I have links to every single place that you can find me online. So in case one gets shut down, like YouTube doesn't really like me that much, unfortunately, because I speak the truth. They've buried the whole mass psychosis, idea very thoroughly. But again, you can follow me anywhere you want to. There's a lot of places I'm trying to be active to spread thin, to avoid the censorship. All right, so getting into today's show, perhaps you saw the video that has now gone super viral. I think the latest figure I saw that they said that there's been over 50 million people that have even either watched or listened to the video where Joe Rogan interviewed Dr. Robert Malone, the inventor of the mRNA vaccine. I can't say, well, actually, I'm on YouTube, so the jab. But also, so the big thing that was really going viral, though, was a segment in the video where Dr. Malone talked about what he calls mass formation psychosis. Now, what's strange is that the mainstream media, the fact checkers, they have jumped on this, which is weird because it's not like he's saying that something doesn't work well or that there's adverse effects of something, nor is he questioning the election. So why would they go into complete overdrive to hide the truth of this, to bear the truth of this? And that, again, whenever the mainstream media goes after something, whenever the fact checkers go after something, to me, it's like my signals start going off. Like, okay, something's going on here, and I'm going to get to the bottom of it. So let me first start by showing you this 1.5-minute clip of the interview with Dr. Robert Malone and Joe Rogan, so you can see where this is going. So let's go ahead and get this started for you.
Basically, European intellectual inquiry into what the heck happened in Germany in the 20s and 30s. Very intelligent, highly educated population, and they went barking mad. And how did that happen? The answer is mass formation psychosis. When you have a society that has become decoupled from each other and has free-floating anxiety and a sense that things don't make sense, we can't understand it. And then their attention gets focused by a leader or a series of events on one small point, just like hypnosis. They literally become hypnotized and can be led anywhere. And one of the aspects of that phenomena is the people that they identify as their leaders, the ones typically that come in and say, you have this pain and I can solve it for you. I and I alone, okay, can fix this problem for you. Okay, then they will follow that person through. It doesn't matter whether they lie to him or whatever. The data are irrelevant. And furthermore, anybody who questions that narrative is to be immediately attacked. They are the other. This is central to mass formation psychosis. And this is what has happened. We had all those conditions. If you remember back before 2019, everybody was complaining, the world doesn't make sense, blah, blah, blah. And we're all isolated from each other. We're all on our little tools. We're not connected socially anymore, except through social media. And then this thing happened and everybody focused on it. That is how mass formation psychosis happens. And that is what's happened here.
So that right there, that's the clip that everyone's freaking out about. Okay, now let me show you a few things here to show you. Here's an article by the Oregonian, right, which are saying that so-called mass formation psychosis does not exist despite what you might have heard on Joe Rogan. So you've got that, which this is just one of many articles just like this. Next article, we've got Reuters fact check. Okay, here's your fact check. No evidence of pandemic mass formation psychosis, say experts speaking to Reuters. Now, it may not have anything to do with the fact that Reuters, I believe that, what is it, the CEO or one of the top people at Reuters has some very suspicious ties to Pfizer, but we're not going to get into that right now. But again, whenever the mainstream media and the fact checkers go after something, it's almost comical, right? If you're familiar with The Matrix, I think The Matrix, as much as I'm not a fan of the philosophies behind the directors and all those things, but the original Matrix paints a great picture of mass delusion, of people being locked into a reality they believe is true that might be false, right? So it's almost as if we're in that Matrix now, and there's articles that are coming out and they're saying that the idea that we're in a matrix is false. Don't believe that idea, right? Like, we're the media, we're telling you what to believe. So, but there's something behind this. There's something that is threatening to them behind this. And while as of right now, they're pinning it on the pandemic, and they're saying, well, the people that believe this is mass psychosis, they're undermining what the doctors have said, and they're spinning it to that narrative. But there's something deeper behind this that I want to dig into. So I first wanted to go a little bit more into what is mass formation psychosis, or mass psychosis, as others have referred to it. And there's a book that I started reading. I'm maybe half the way through it, but I pulled a lot of quotes out of this book. I highly recommend that you read it if you can. For me, I'm not sure if you're like me, but I really, really enjoy digging into the details, the research behind things, especially human psychology. And I'm especially interested in how the human mind can be manipulated and deceived, because I believe that if you watch me, I've talked about this before, right? This is an information war we're fighting. Okay, so the information that we're talking about here, I believe this is ammunition in this war. I'm doing my part to try to help with this, as you are too. And a lot of folks will say, "Hey, Seth, how can I help?" If you want to help, if you want to, fight in this war, the best thing you can do is share information. So if you want to help me, share this video with as many people as possible. Even if you have friends which are on the fence, and as I'll talk about later, I think a lot more people are on the fence now than they've ever been, and a lot more people are questioning the narrative. I really try to approach my content in a way that anybody can watch it and not be offended. The best I can, but I just try to be truthful. I try to show where I've gotten my research. I ask questions. I admit when I'm wrong. But the key here is understanding, what is this mass formation psychosis and why are they so threatened by it? So the book that I'm telling you about, let me pull this up for you. This is the book, and I unfortunately bought it from Amazon. You might be able to find it for somewhere else, but it's called The Rape of the Mind, and it's by a man named Just Merleau. And this is a very, very, very profound book, which I'm going to share a lot of quotes from this book. And you might ask me, well, why, Seth, is this called The Rape of the Mind? Why is your video called The Rape of the Mind? So I'm going to explain that to you in a second here. But before I get to there, I want to first show you a quick video. And so this entire video I'm going to show you, the larger part of the video is in the link, which you can find. in the description. But this is a really, really important video. It was done by, so there's a guy that has a YouTube channel called Academy of Ideas, which it's brilliant. I highly recommend you check out Academy of Ideas. And he really touches on what's happening today through historical, philosophical, psychological lenses to break down what we're going through right now. And he did an amazing video called the Killing of the Mind about mass psychosis. And he partnered with another guy called After School, his YouTube channel, who does animation. So I'm going to show you this quick snippet of the video, and I've got a few different snippets I'll be showing you during the show. And again, the link is in the description. I highly recommend you follow these people on YouTube. They do brilliant work. But let me go ahead and pull this up for you, because this is a good entry point to start this discussion about mass psychosis.
Natural catastrophes. In this video, we are going to explore the most dangerous of all psychic epidemics, the mass psychosis.
And I'll pause it really quick because here's a quote from Carl Jung, which I believe really, really, gosh, is really critical to understand right now. He says, "It is not famine, not earthquakes, not microbes, not cancer, but man himself who is man's greatest danger to man, for the simple reason that there is no adequate protection against psychic epidemics, which are infinitely more devastating than the worst of natural catastrophes." That's a really, really key quote.
A mass psychosis is an epidemic of madness, and it occurs when a large portion of a society loses touch with reality and descends into delusions. Such a phenomenon is not a thing of fiction. Two examples of mass psychoses are the American and European witch hunts of the 16th and 17th centuries, and the rise of totalitarianism in the 20th century. During the witch hunts, thousands of individuals, mostly women, were killed, not for any crimes they committed, but because they became the scapegoats of societies gone mad. In some Swiss villages, writes Francis Hill, there were scarcely any women left alive after the frenzy had finally burned itself out. When a mass psychosis occurs, the results are devastating. Jung studied this phenomenon and wrote that the individuals who make up the infected society become morally and spiritually inferior. They sink unconsciously to an inferior intellectual level. They become more unreasonable, irresponsible, emotional, erratic, and unreliable. And worst of all, crimes the individual alone could never stand are freely committed by the group smitten by madness. What makes matters worse is that those suffering from a mass psychosis are unaware of what is occurring. For just as an individual gone mad cannot step out of his mind to observe the errors in his ways, so too there is no Archimedean point from which those living through a mass psychosis can observe their collective madness.
So that this gives a general idea of what this is. Now, you can look at this, the entire idea of mass psychosis. It's actually quite easy to look at it and see how it might apply to the pandemic, right? Isolation. There's a lot of things surrounding this. It's easy to look at. But what you can see, what's really important is that, and as he pointed out there, and I'm going to show you a continuation of that video, which shows why what causes the actual mass psychosis, because there's actually a lot of triggers that cause this. And what I'm going to do with on this video today is really show you historically what it is that has led us to this, because these things didn't start 2 years ago at the beginning of the pandemic. I'm referencing a book that was written by Edward Bernays, of the father of propaganda, referencing his book, which I'll get to later in the show, but also the book "The Rape of the Mind," which was written, I believe, was written in the 50s, right? And the author of that book was he's Dutch, and he escaped, the Nazis, and he had to interrogate a lot of Nazi soldiers, and he was a psychoanalyst, and he had to help train people on how to endure torture under the Germans, right, during the Nazi occupation. So you had to train people on how to endure torture. So this guy studied really heavily both the Germans and the Soviets and their methods of brainwashing, of torturing people, and how they were able to achieve those. So let me go on and let me actually continue this video. Let me get this going for you
Mad
again. Okay, so what causes a mass
can
psychosis?
observe their all brain.
Let
While
me
there
pull
are
this up
many
for you.
potential triggers of madness, such as an excessive use of drugs or alcohol, brain injuries, and other illnesses, these physical causes will not concern us here. Our concern is with psychological, or what are called psychogenic triggers, as these are the most common culprits of the mass psychosis. The most prevalent psychogenic cause of a psychosis is a flood of negative emotions, such as fear or anxiety, that drives an individual into a state of panic. When in a state of panic, an individual will naturally seek relief, as it is too mentally and physically draining to subsist in this hyper emotional state. While escaping from the state of panic can be accomplished through adaptive means, such as facing up to and defeating the fear generating threat, another way to escape is to undergo a psychotic break. A psychotic break is not a descent into a state of greater disorder, as many believe, but a reordering of one's experiential world, which blends fact and fiction, or delusions and reality, in a way that helps end the feelings of panic. Silvano Arietti, one of the 20th century's foremost authorities on schizophrenia, explains the psychogenic steps that lead to madness. Firstly, there is the phase of panic, when the patient starts to perceive things in a different way, is frightened on account of it, appears confused.
All right, so we'll stop for there on that. But what I want to do is I want to pull up a quote. This is a quote from the book I was talking about, The Rape of the Mind. And this is from Joost Merleau, who's the author. And this is a really, really important one to look at. Okay, about the weapons of totalitarianism. And I'll just make a point quickly is that the whole thing behind the book cover, right? And the reason why I chose to title my show today "The Rape of the Mind" is that he shows that the Latin origins of the word rape, which are rapier. I'm not sure. I don't speak Latin. It actually means to steal. It's the theft. It's the seizure of something. And so what he's talking about, the whole book is how can someone steal your mind? Because if you look at, and this is like, I honestly I think it's one of the most important concepts for all of us to understand right now in this time in history is that this is okay. What are we experiencing? We're experiencing, if you've seen past what's happening, you look at it and you say, look, we're going through a time where there are a group of people that are trying to push a very bad motive upon the people of the world, right? They're calling it the Great Reset, what they want to call it. So, but fundamentally, though, to win this, they have to steal our minds. There's too many of us. So they have to use their tools of propaganda and psychology and influence to get people to basically to their minds to be so weakened that they can control our minds. I think it's a fundamental part of the human world that we have free will, right? We have the ability to choose, and that's the most dangerous thing. It's why the elites are so against the Constitution, because the Constitution is actually saying, look, you as an individual in America, you have free will. God gave you free will as a sovereign being, and your free will is actually more important. It's above any other government or any other ruler or totalitarian society, right? Obviously, there's rules. You can't say, well, okay, free will means I'll go murder everybody. You can't do that, right? But we have our free will to choose, and so the social engineers, which is a good way to refer to these people, they have been in control of our society or a lot of the mechanisms of our society for a very long time. They understand this. They understand that, like, if you go back to Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, they understand they have to brainwash us into believing something and getting us to make the decision to do something within the realm of delusion they've created. Right. So let me pull up this quote, which is, I think, a really incredible quote from the book. Okay, this is where Joost Merleau says, there is another important weapon in the totalitarians use in their campaign to frighten the world into submission. This is the weapon of psychological shock. Hitler kept his enemies in a state of constant confusion and diplomatic upheaval. They never knew what this unpredictable madman was going to do next. Hitler was never logical because he knew that was what he was expected to be. Logic can be met with logic, while illogic cannot. It confuses those who think straight. The big lie and monotonously repeated nonsense have more emotional appeal in a Cold War than logic and reason. While the enemy is still searching for a reasonable counter argument to the first lie, the totalitarians can assault him with another. So think about it. This was written that was written, I think, in 1958, I believe, when this book came out. And he's saying that, one of Hitler's tactics was confusion, right? Because what happens, right? All of us, as human beings, we're trying to form a construct of our world that makes sense. We're trying to think, okay, the sun rises in the morning, it sets at night, the moon comes out, I wake up, I go to work Monday through Friday, right? So even though a lot of us love chaos, maybe we're more artistic, like myself. My wife complains I'm a little more of a chaotic person. Fundamentally, though, we're trying to find a structure for how we live. And so they know this, right? The people that have been trained, and we'll get into Pavlov's dog and the experiments and the studies from the Soviets on the whole ideas of Ivan Pavlov, but they know that if they can break down the idea that we have of the world and confuse us, we'll get more and more despondent. And what happens is, as we get more despondent, our mind weakens. As our mind weakens, we're more open to the influence by emotional impulses, whether it's fear, anxiety, anger. And so, if you look at what's happened, it's interesting because as I've watched the pandemic unroll, right? As I've watched it, kind of carry on whatever plan is behind it. If you notice, maybe 6 months or a year ago, the narrative, it's almost like they wanted the narrative to break, right? Because it was like, okay, 2 months or say 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and then it kept changing. But then what's happening is say, okay, once we get the jabs rolled out, it's gonna fix everything. And everyone thought, okay, great. Okay, I'll go get my jab and it's gonna fix everything and we'll go back to normal, right? And they were so convinced that was gonna work, but then all of a sudden, it doesn't work. And okay, so people are like, "What? That doesn't make sense." They say, "Okay, wear masks, wear masks." Now they say the cloth masks don't work. That doesn't work. And I thought to myself as I was watching this, why are they why are they doing this? Why are they allowing the holes to appear in their narrative? But the more I studied things like what was in this book and then some other instances or information I've been reading about this, the more you can see it's intentional, that they actually want us to be confused. It's designed to have the average person that's trying to make sense of this not be able to make sense of it and just be like, "Well, they said that doesn't work, but now it does work. I said this doesn't work, that doesn't work." And they're literally trying to get people into a state where they can't make sense of what's happening, because the more people are in that state, the more they're just going to be naturally drawn to following whoever they see as the authority, right? Which right now we can see that they've made Fauci the authority, right? Now, I'm not following what he says. I'm sure you're not either. But for a lot of people, though, they are, because they've positioned him as the expert, right? And so you can see that this strategy, it's actually part of it. Confusion and chaos is part of their strategy. So let me go back into another quote. Again, this is again from the book. Let me pull this up for you. He says, in the Pavlovian strategy, right? Which Pavlov, if you remember Pavlov, let me jump back on here real quick. Pavlov was the guy who did this study with the dogs, right? Where he'd have these dogs in a lab setting and he would feed them, but when he'd feed them, he'd ring the bell, right? And so he'd ring the bell, and then when they were fed, and so they became trained to think, okay, when the bell rings, I'm eating food. But then he stopped feeding them, and it was to ring the bell, and he would see the dog would naturally start salivating. So it was, Pavlov's dogs, basically. I'm sure you've heard about that. So what he realized is that we can be conditioned for things. Now, when the Soviets saw this, right, the communists, their first thought was, how can we use this on human beings? And so in the Soviet Union, they had an entire part of the Communist Party was set up to study Pavlov's ideas and to study how to basically bring Pavlov experiments and use those experiments to brainwash mankind. And unfortunately, those studies did not end with the Soviet Union. A lot of information has flown into the modern media apparatuses, and we're going to get into that in a little bit here. So back to this quote, though, because I wanted to just preface the whole Pavlov discussion. So in the Pavlovian strategy, terrorizing force can finally be replaced by a new organization of the means of communication. Ready-made opinions can be distributed day by day through press, radio, and so on, again and again, till they reach the nerve cell and implant a fixed pattern of thought in the brain. Consequently, guided public opinion is the result, according to the Pavlovian theoreticians, butchered that word, of a good propaganda technique, and the polls a verification of the temporary success of action of the Pavlovian machinations on the mind. So basically, what they're saying here is that if they can create this fracturing of society, right? But amidst that, what they have is they have a constant drumming of the press, right? In the earlier quote, he mentioned emotional response. So what this does is that when they break down your perception of reality into chaos, and so when you're looking at things, you can't make sense of what the next thing is. You can't make sense of why Fauci would say that masks work and they don't work, and they work and they don't work again. Again, I see someone saying Daryl Smith Jr. in the comments, it's wrong think, right? If you're familiar with 1984, double speak. What is double speak or double think? It's getting you to hold two contradictory ideas in your head that are both true, right? It's like having the idea in your head that black is white, but white is black at the same time. It's all about fracturing our psyche. But what the author Juice Merleau is saying in this quote is that amidst that, if you have this media apparatus which is drumming in messages, it's safe and effective, it's safe and effective, it's safe and effective, it's safe and effective. That's what you're hearing. That's what becomes consistent, right? So for all of us that have friends or family that may have been that may have been much more on board with, say, the overall pandemic narrative, right? And say they were quite fearful of it. For one, please have compassion for them, right? Because fear is a very, very, very controlling emotion, and these people, but they're behind these fear campaigns are experts. These are people that they're pulling on research from the 20s and the 30s, and looking at all the research that happened under the Nazis of how to control people. It wasn't just the Nazis, it was the communists, it was the Chinese communists. They have perfected these methods of mass psychosis and mass population control. So for those of us that have friends and family that have been overwhelmed by that and are fearful, and maybe they don't want to see you for Christmas because of this, really have compassion for them, because they are being their minds are being really manipulated by professional manipulators, like the most evil people on earth that are behind these messages. So it's just really important, because it's that media repetition that keeps telling them that, right? Safe and effective, etc. So let me go up into another quote I want to show you from this book, where he says, "He who dictates and formulates the words and phrases we use, he who is master of the press and radio, is master of the mind." Again, it's showing us again, right? So what are we seeing now, right? So why is the media so afraid of mass psychosis? Why is the media so afraid? Is big tech, why is Google changing the algorithms so when you search for mass psychosis, nothing comes up that's of use? Because mass psychosis, it's putting a name to what's happening, right? If you go to your friend, say your mother-in-law, and you say, Tammy, you're actually in the Matrix. I'm trying to red pill you. She's like, you need to stop watching these video game movies, right? That's what they're going to respond to it, right? Because there's no concept, right? So if a doctor is diagnosing something, why do you go to a doctor? A lot of times you have to go to a doctor because the doctor will diagnose what you have. They say, oh, it's not just some random strange thing that you're feeling. You've actually got kidney stones. It's like, oh, here's how you treat it. So the thing is that why are they so afraid of mass psychosis is because mass psychosis is the diagnosis for the insanity, for the brainwashing that has been, for the wool that's been pulled over our eyes as a society. Okay. And we're going to get into how to overcome it and how to stop it. So that's the kind of, towards the later part of this. But what they know, though, is that it's through the control of the media apparatuses that they're able to do this. Now, it's not just media, it's big tech, it's social media, et cetera, because one of the key points that Pavlov understood when he was training these, and he says this, that if you have a dog in isolation in a laboratory, you can train that dog's responses way faster, right? So they know this, what solitary confinement in prisons, they know that if they can isolate people, that when we're in isolation, we don't have the ability to talk at our workplace around the water cooler and bounce ideas off, or you can't go to your church and talk to your fellow people that are there about what's happening. They know that when we're isolated, that our minds become a lot easier to infect. Okay, so look what's happened. Do you think that it's a random occurrence that they're using lockdowns and isolation and social distancing? Do you think that that's not part of some bigger, sinister plan? And even if it wasn't some sinister plan, you have to look at this and say, you know what? The people that are behind this, they know how these things work. They're not stupid. So even if you want to try to say, give the WHO a hall pass and say, well, maybe they're not, maybe they're not trying to break us psychologically on purpose. But then you then have to look at that and you have to say, well, you're really smart and you should know that the research shows that when we're put into isolation, the structure of our minds that holds everything together starts to collapse. They should know that. So I'm not going to give them any hall passes here. But again, looking at the media, I think that for a lot of us, maybe in the past 5 years since Trump started ran for president, it hit us. The media is lying to us, right? The media is trying to do something. But then look at the media and say, look at what we've studied so far. How do you induce a mass psychosis? Well, through fear and confusion. What does the media do to us every day? 10 years ago, 20 years ago. This didn't just start 2 years ago. And this is the important thing, and this is the thing that no one's really talking about with mass psychosis, is that they have been programming us for mass psychosis for decades and decades and decades. Honestly, I think even around turn of the century, as we're approaching World War I, they're already starting a lot of these things. Let alone once we got into the Cold War, all of these different things the media was doing. They've been doing this for a very, very long time. Now, I'm going to show you a clip from the Plandemic movie, which this is from Plandemic 2 Indoctrination with David Martin. This is by Mickey Willis. If you haven't seen the entire movie, head on over to plandemicseries.com. I can't put it up on YouTube. It's like one of the most censored videos on earth. And this video may get deleted just for showing you part of the video, but I've got about a 4-minute clip that's showing you what's behind the mainstream media. And say you have friends or family that are unsure of things, they don't really agree with you, show them this clip. Just show them this small clip and say, do you really trust the mainstream media? Watch this.
Since the invention of the printing press, there's been a battle to control disseminated information. In the early 1900s, oil tycoon John D. Rockefeller took control of every newspaper and news editor of his era. He became America's first billionaire, paving the way for the power-hungry ever since. Thus began the gold rush for the modern world's most precious resource, the narrative.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
During a Senate committee investigation, it was revealed that the CIA had been conducting a covert operation to infiltrate and control U.S. media. They called it Operation Mockingbird.
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals. Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks? This, I think, gets into the kind of details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
Over 3,000 CIA contracted and trained operatives are placed in key positions within top media outlets. Posing as editors and journalists, these well-paid actors never dared to question the effect of their lies on the world beyond their cozy studio.
How often does the CIA manipulate the media in this way?
It goes beyond your wildest imagination. Setting up student organizations so they could draw radical students in. 5,000 university professors co-opted to help the CIA manipulate people's minds. Journalists in the U.S., including big-name journalists, co-opted to function routinely to help the CIA put out stories and biases to the world.
As this 1952 CIA memo says, the aim is controlling an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will.
It's a great brainwashing process to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interest of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country.
Would you say that continues today?
Well,
Yeah, I would think probably for a reporter it would continue today, but because of all of the revelations, I think you've got to be much more careful about it.
So how do we know that Operation Mockingbird still isn't in effect? Well, we don't.
It was the Telecommunications Act of 1996 that opened the door for predatory corporations to monopolize the industries of print and broadcast.
This bill protects consumers against monopolies. It guarantees the diversity of voices.
Today, a handful of corporate empires own and control the vast majority of everything you read, hear, and watch. From the biggest movie studios, television and radio networks, newspapers and magazines, to the vast universe of internet news and entertainment sites.
Amazon has transformed its operations in response to COVID-19 to protect employees and keep packages flowing.
The company is keeping its employees safe and healthy while still delivering those packages to your doorstep. The company is keeping its employees safe and healthy. The company is keeping its employees safe. Millions of Americans staying at home are relying on Amazon.
And that is how it works. It's like a house of mirrors where you're seeing the same thing over and over and over again, except it's distorted. There's an
in my opinion, that's one of the most powerful videos I've ever seen. So that was, for those that I saw some of you asking in the comments, that was done by Mickey Willis. The URL to go online and watch that, it's free. It's free to watch. That's from Pandemic 2 with Dr. David Martin. It's a little over an hour long. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. I'd put the link in the description, but it might get the video, canceled on YouTube or Facebook. So, but the link is pandemicseries.com. It's like pandemic, but with an L. Okay, so pandemicseries.com. He's in the process of filming the third part, Pandemic Series 3. But looking at that video and looking at the idea, okay, what we talked about here so far, mass psychosis, mass formation psychosis. Why are they so afraid of this? Because this is their number one tool. This is the number one tool for them to control our society, is by controlling the minds of the people. And if you do end up buying that book, The Rape of the Mind, which I highly, highly recommend it, it's also just great for learning what they're doing and sharing it with your friends and family and showing them quotes. And that guy wrote the book in the 50s after studying, and interrogating Nazis and looking at, the whole premise was, how is it that people can take over society and turn man against man? Right? If you look at the videos that we see going around right now, whether it's the woman, was it the cheerleader on the airplane that slapped a guy, because he wasn't wearing a mask and she wasn't wearing one either. It's psychosis. It's a psychosis that's emerging. But what's really important to understand is that it didn't just start 2 years ago. It started before I was born. Look, I'm an 80s child. Okay. This started before I was born. There's a book, which I'd love to do a show on this, about the four arguments to eliminate the TV. I forget the name. It was by an advertising executive, which I'd love to do a show. But he was saying back at the introduction of the television, he saw at that time the danger of how the TV could use to program the masses, right? What do you watch when you're watching TV? What's the program tonight, honey? What are you watching? So let me pull up the next thing I'll show you here. So again, this is the quote. Okay, so Edward Bernays, if you watch the video I did on Trump's plan and how he's going after the big media, I shared this quote from Edward Bernays. If you're not familiar with Edward Bernays, again, he wrote a book called Propaganda. I think it was in 1928. He wrote this book called Propaganda. I should have brought down here to show you and hold it up for you. Incredible book, all about how propaganda is used to control a society. And so this book that he wrote in the 20s was the precursor, I'm sure, to a lot of what they did in Nazi Germany, what they did in Soviet Russia, communist China. So look at this quote here. Think about everything that we're talking about, right? Okay, when did this start? Did mass psychosis start 2 years ago? Now look at this quote here. He says, "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested. largely by men we have never heard of. In almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct, in our ethical thinking, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind. That was in the 1920s. He wrote that. Do you think Trump talking about fake news during the 2016 election was the first time? This is the 1920s. This is the 1920s. So Edward Bernays was, I think he was the grandson of Sigmund Freud, and he went on to basically consult governments. He helped a lot of the advertising companies, get kicked off, and helped with, basically, what we now know as consumer advertising and consumer marketing, which basically, fundamentally makes us desire something we don't need, like that new car or Dove soap over our regular soap. He was the master of propaganda, but a lot of people look at him and look at his role in advertising, where actually the biggest role that he played was consulting governments and advising governments on how to control their population. This was back in the 20s, folks. And this is a long time ago. So this is some serious stuff. Now, I want to talk about, here's another quote to show you. This is again from the author of The Rape of the Mind, Joost Meerloo, saying, the modern words brainwashing, thought control, and menticide serve to provide a clearer conception of the actual methods by which man's integrity can be violated. When a concept is given its right name, it can be more easily recognized. And it is with this recognition that the opportunity for systematic correction begins. So this is an important part here, because as I was telling you, that it's like the doctor, you have to diagnose something first. You have to conceptualize it. We can't go around telling people you're stuck in the matrix, right? That's just not going to work. We can't do that. All right. But the idea of a mass psychosis, that can work. And so that's why he says that. And he says the modern words brainwashing, thought control, and menticide. So what is menticide? Right? Menticide is, icide is killing. Ment is the killing of the mind. So that's what his book is. It's how these people kill our minds. Okay. But what we're going to look at now is, how is it they're able to achieve this? What are the tools that they use? And now I'm going to go back to the video from after school, this Academy of Ideas, and talk about how they accomplish this, because this is key. Because if we can understand the fundamentals of how they control our society, we can then figure out how to walk things back. If you figure out the methods they use, we can figure out how to undo them. And actually, their methods are very rudimentary. So check out this portion of the video.
Priming a population for the crime of menticide begins with the sowing of fear. When an individual is flooded with negative emotions, such as fear or anxiety, he or she is very susceptible to a descent into the delusions of madness. Threats, real, imagined, or fabricated, can be used to sow fear, but a particularly effective technique is to use waves of terror. Under this technique, the sowing of fear is staggered with periods of calm. But each of these periods of calm is followed by the manufacturing of an even more intense spell of fear. And on the process goes. Or as Meerloo writes, each wave of terrorizing creates its effects more easily after a breathing spell than the one that preceded it, because people are still disturbed by their previous experience. Morality becomes lower and lower, and the psychological effects of each.
So there you can see, right? And I'm going to pull that back up. I want to show you that graph that he drew. Let me pull that back up to show you, because that's, sorry, one second. That is a critical part of this equation.
Comes lower and lower, and the psychological.
Okay, so looking at this graph right here. Okay, so what you see is that this is very intentional, right? Remember we talked before about confusion. So what are they intentionally doing? If you look into how prisoners are brainwashed or broken down, especially look at the PO war, prisoners of war, POW stuff, they have to break people down, but you break them down by letting them not trust the calm that they have. And so you can see here, so you see the graph, it goes up. It's actually on their side, right? It goes up, up, up. So it's fear, and there's a little bit of calm, and then it's fear and a little bit of calm. And it's fear and a little bit of calm. And that's how they drive people into mass psychosis, right? Is they give you that period, right? Have we not experienced that in the past 2 years where it's been, oh my gosh, there's a case, there's a new variant coming out. The cases are through the roof. And then it's like, okay, cases aren't that bad anymore. It's like, whew, okay, we made it through that. We made it through. And it's like, okay, we're lifting off our mandates. Okay, no wearing masks. We're taking a step back. Things are back to normal. Oh no, there's a new Delta variant. It's like, okay, the Delta variant. It's like, oh my gosh, the Delta variant. Everyone's freaking out about the Delta variant. And I got family calling me and Seth, look out for the Delta variant. Don't go in the airports and everything. And we have that. And then once it lessens, okay, it's like, okay, we're through the Delta variant. It's the Omicron variant, right? This is exactly how they do this. It is so intentional, right? It's demoralization, right? As Donna Anderson's saying in the chat, it's a demoralization. What's it doing? It's getting us to not trust anything. It's breaking us psychologically. Now, what's also interesting here is that if you're drawing the right line, you can see, right? Look at that blue line right there. That's the line of morality. And that's an interesting point to look at, is why is it that morality drops amidst this? Okay, so I'm going to go back to full screen now, but just keep that in your mind, how as the wave of fear goes up, they take you up, they use fear, the morality drops. So why is that? Well, I think this you have to really kind of dig into the overall communist ideology. Why do the communists attack morality? Because they know that it's morality that protects us from our fear, right? It's morality that brings us closer to God. It's morality that, or vice versa, getting closer to God makes you, I think, more moral if you're doing it the right way. It's the faith. But what happens though is that as they increase these levels of fear, our morality drops. But you could also say it and look at it from the perspective that if they can cause our morality to drop, we're easier to induce with fear. So they know this. Why is it that even Karl Marx himself declared a war on God? He made a pledge with the devil to declare a war on God. Why is it that communists always go after morality? Look at the cultural Marxism happening in the United States. Look at shows like Cuties pushing pedophilia. Look at the free love movement of the 60s. All these things, if you trace back the origins, it's the masterminds behind these big communist blocs, these big people that are pushing for a totalitarian system. But they know they have to break down on morality to have this happen, because what happens, right? When your morality breaks down, your confidence breaks down, your self-awareness breaks down, and you're much more easily driven into a more primal state, right? If you look at a bear or a wolf, you can't say they have morality, right? That's not how their brain is programmed. Their brain is primarily what you call the reptilian brain or the mammalian brain, right? They're not processing these higher values like creativity or compassion or morality, right? So their thinking is down at that primal level of fight or flight, which happens in the what people consider the reptilian brain. It's the most base of our brain, right? Now, I don't believe in evolution. I'm not buying into that, but it comes from the fact that if you look at how reptiles' brains are wired, a reptile only has this fight or flight, action. They don't show love necessarily the same way that a bear would towards her cubs. It's very different, right? So they realize that they have to drop our morality to get us to increase the fear. So it goes hand in hand. So, but herein lies the key, though. Herein lies the key of how do we overcome this, right? And I don't want this video to be daunting, where you're like, oh my goodness, like they've been doing this stuff since the 20s, and how are we going to come out of it now? Actually, if I look at what's happening, what's happening, what's unfolding in the world, I can tell you they're losing. And I say that with full confidence. It's not because I trust in some plan or any of those things. I'm looking at what's happening. I can tell you that they are losing. They're losing control. And we're going to talk a little bit about this. But what's really important here is that we have to understand that how their system works, it's actually quite simple. Okay? They get us hooked on the media. Fear is also addictive. Rage is addictive, right? So it benefits them because the emotions that they need to get us hooked on, to get to kind of fill up our brains instead of our other emotions and other ways of thinking, like compassion and integrity and truthfulness. They want to replace that with greed and desire and lust and anger and jealousy. So that's what they're pushing. If you look at the agenda, again, cultural Marxism, look at Hollywood, look at Netflix, what they're pushing. They're pushing those emotions and that way of living and that level of morality, right? So, but if you look at, they're doing it through Hollywood, they're doing it through the mainstream media. Obviously, big tech is playing its part. So how do we combat this? Well, if we turn off the TV, that's one thing. But if we have friends or family, how do we help them step out of it? Well, one thing is you show them videos like this. You show them the video that's in the link that I've been showing you from Academy of Ideas. But I think what's really important, though, is we have to use our morality. We have to use our compassion to say, look, I know that you're probably really scared, but let me show you why maybe you shouldn't be as scared, right? Let me show you a different side of the story as why maybe you shouldn't have to fear as much as you do, right? So if we can help people overcome fear, if we can help people see past the media, right? Because we see it's like if there's one tube that's like stuck into the brains of people that allows the social engineers, we'll call them, to control people, it's that mainstream media tube. It's just pumping them full of fear. So if we can help people disconnect from that, they're going to start to see through things. And the thing is that people already are. And this is what's encouraging to me, right? Let me show you something. I'm not sure if you saw this article come out yet, but check this out. Scandal-ridden CNN sees ratings dive by 90% after 2021 coverage. A 90% nosedive in their ratings. Okay, that is huge. That's massive. Look, I have friends and family that had been really consumed by the fear of COVID, right? They didn't see past it. They didn't see through the things that I may have seen a couple of years ago, and I changed the ways I consume my news information. And these are people that are both in America and in Australia, right, where I have family in both places, that they were at one point, even a couple of months ago, hooked on this. They're watching the cases every day. They're saying, look, you got to get your jab. You got to get your jab. And they were really consumed by it. But something is breaking. And even these people, they are now seeing through the narrative. They're saying, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not going to watch anymore. They're turning off the TV. And these are people, I'm telling you, that were glued to CNN a couple of months ago, right? And these are just a few people I have in my family and immediate family and friend circle. I have some family that is here in Ohio that they were up to like the second booster and something snapped. And they said, you know what? I'm not doing it anymore. I'm turning off the TV. I'm no longer going to live in fear. And that's why this is the biggest thing that the elites or the social engineers, I hate even using the word elites. It implies that they're elite. I actually think they're scum. They're like on the bottom of our shoes. They're so terrible. And when this is all said and done, they're going to be in a special place in hell. But this is what they're so scared of, is they're scared of people switching off their means of control. They're scared of us getting together and talking to one another. They're scared of you sharing a video with somebody, or better yet, taking them out for coffee and saying, hey, let's talk. And look, I know it's uncomfortable. I know sometimes it's difficult because, all of us, you've put yourself out there. You've been judged. You've been called a lunatic. You've been called a conspiracy theorist. But you know what? In previous wars, people had a lot worse. They lost a leg. They lost their lives. So if all that we're up against is maybe, at the worst, we're losing our job for speaking out, but actually, usually it's a lot easier than that. What is it? We're gonna have a friend that gets angry at us for asking about something or trying to show them something. We have to push through it. But as I mentioned before, I think that compassion is the greatest thing, because in my own understanding and how I try to live my life, I view compassion as one of the highest principles that we can live by. And when you come at something, when you come at a situation with, and on that chart of morality, if you're up here because you're compassionate towards somebody, I think that you can do a lot to lift that person up to where you are and help them see through the fear that's really been consuming them. So that is the message that I have. That is the message that I wanted to make with this show. is to help us all see through, to see through even for us where we've been programmed and where we've allowed ourselves to be influenced by the cultural Marxism, by Hollywood, by the mainstream media, because it didn't just start 2 years ago, it didn't start 4 years ago, it didn't start 10 years ago. It has been in place since we were born, right? That's how long they've been sowing these seeds. So I hope that all of us can look at ourselves and see through that, but also really try to help what they're doing. Now, I see something here. I'm not positive of this, but someone just said that Supreme Court ruled against Joe Biden. So that would be a good thing. Also, we're talking about positive news. That was what someone said. Just a lady said that in the comments. So maybe that's a good sign for us that we're actually doing a lot better towards winning this battle than we thought. But I look. I know these are scary times. I know. Trust me. This has been really tough. This has been really difficult for all of us. We've seen our friends and family turn against us. Our entire society's been upside down. Look, we're almost a year into the presidency of Joe Biden. Like I never thought I'd be right here after a year of this. I didn't think there's a lot of ideas I thought about what was going to happen, but okay, can you hear me now? Let me make sure that you can hear me. Like the Verizon commercial. Can you hear me now? I'll give you a second. Let me know how we're going. Let me know if you can hear me. All right. Thank you all. That's just, again, as I've said before, we're not, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, we're not backed by Vanguard and Black Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, Marco. So I think I'm back. Let me know. I'm so sorry about that. Um, Occasionally we have these things. So let me know if you can see me. Okay, great. Okay, great. Thank you so much for all of you that waited. So tell you what, for all of you that waited, so I'm still going to hop over onto Rise TV, but first I'm going to do some question and answer just on Facebook and YouTube, just because I really appreciate all of you that waited for me. So if you have any questions that you want to ask me, primarily about today's show, but if you want to ask what how my chickens are doing, that's okay as well. So if you have any questions, then you just ask them in the comments. I've got Marco helping out, and he's pulling down the questions off of Rise. So there's a lot of comments coming in on YouTube and Facebook. So if I see the comments, if I see a question, just write question in all caps on there, and then then I'll be able to see and kind of know, okay, hey, there's a question. So okay, so let me know. Let me check the other streams really quick. Looks like we're good again. Okay, great. Okay. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at. Okay. So actually, Valley S. When did you wake up, Seth? Great question. This is Valley S from YouTube, and so I would say, well, it's two stages. So I in 2007, I was in art school, and that was when I first started studying communism. I met this guy that was a student at a university close to mine, just through a mutual friend, and he just so happened to be like this really kind person, this Chinese guy, and he had this sadness to him though. This is like it's 2006, 2007. And the more I got to know, I was talking to him, and it found out that he had spent like 8 years in prison in China. This is 2006, 2007. I met him, and so he had spent 8 years in prison in China, and he was tortured heavily. He told me some of the things he went through. Like at one point, they strapped him basically to like a wooden cross, and they tortured him with cattle prods, like burned his flesh, burned every part of his body. I won't go into details. But he was a political prisoner in China because he was practicing this meditation practice called Falun Gong. And it was so that was what really piqued my interest. I was like, this is happening in China. And as I studied it, it was the Uyghur Muslims, the underground Christians, Falun Gong, even a lot of Buddhists. There are people in communist China that were being tortured in ways that I didn't think was happening. And so I started, got basically dedicated my life to fighting communism at that point. But it wasn't until I watched the documentary by Curtis Bowers, Agenda. Fast forward many years, I was really focused on communism in China. That was when I saw Curtis Bowers' documentary on called Agenda, Grinding America Down. That was when I really realized that communism had come to America in the way that it did. So that was kind of my process of waking up, I guess you could say. So yeah, it's bad. So, okay, let me see a few other questions kind of popping in. Just scrolling through. Okay, actually, Maureen Smith. How do you know someone is suffering from this psychosis? Well, I think that I think one thing is just asking them questions. Like, I think probably just through your interactions with them, I would say that, like, what are the symptoms of the psychosis? Well, I would say that the symptoms are fear, anxiety. I think that there's a handful of things. People, they're going to have an inclination to be judging towards people that haven't been jabbed. Do they watch a lot of the social media or the mainstream media? Are they watching CNN? I think the biggest thing though is fear and anxiety. If there's people that if they're living if they're living in fear and anxiety, that's what I would say is probably the biggest indicator that they're still kind of buying into this psychosis. Because for me, it's I can't say I don't have any fear or anxiety in my life, but as I've seen through this I can certainly say that as I've seen through the lies, I'm not controlled by it in the way that a lot of people are. I'm not rushing off to get the booster or any of this kind of stuff. So I think that's that's a big one, actually. Okay. Question. So Patricia Swiss, this is the last question I'm going to answer from, actually, I'll answer Patricia's and then I'll answer Stefan or Stephen Hickson's. These are the last two I'll take from Facebook and YouTube and Rumble, and then I'm going to hop over onto Rise TV. So Patricia Swiss, where do we go from here? Like, to me, that was the ending in the video. Like, we have to have compassion for people. We have to try to wake people up. Like, to me, this is so far beyond political parties. It's so far beyond, just all the different ways that we're divided. Like, we have to help our fellow mankind wake up, because they have been trying to put a mass psychosis on the entire world for a very long time. So that's where I think we go from here. And last question from the public places from Stephen Hickson. What do you think their main aim is? I think that the main aim with this is, if you look at the Great Reset, you look at Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, you look at Lockstep, they've told us, the Georgia Guidestones, I believe that the social engineers that are behind this, their eventual aim is to enslave humanity via a technocracy, right? Looking in the end goals of the CCP, their aim is to enslave mankind and move us into a technocracy where we're controlled similar to how people are controlled in mainland China. Our thoughts are monitored, everything. They're pushing a transhumanist agenda. So that's where they're heading with this. So, okay. All right. So great questions. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you for those that stuck around through a little hiccup there. It just happens sometimes. Live, I've thought before, should I just do pre-recorded stuff? Live is difficult. Live is not an easy process to overcome, and especially if I'm using more fancy equipment. It's not just a webcam on a laptop. So I appreciate your patience with me, though. So I'm now going to be heading over to Rise TV to finish the Q&A over there. If you want to join, it's a great way of supporting what I'm doing. I'm one of the owners of Rise TV, and Rise TV we're building as a platform. I'm not sure how much this was muted before, but it's a platform where we can come together and talk and interact. It's a great community. We have a ton of content on Rise TV, whether it's things on communism or human trafficking or adrenochrome even. So there's a free trial link in the description. You can click below, come check it out, and I hope to see you there. So for those of you that joined, so again, Rumble, Facebook, YouTube, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and sign off in those places. Thank you very, very much for joining.